My sister moved in as my roommate but became my husband's mistress. When I first opened the door that afternoon and saw Lily standing there, suitcase in one hand, mascara streaked from crying, I didn't know that moment would be the quiet beginning of the worst heartbreak of my life. She looked so small, so lost, like the little sister I used to protect from everything. I remember the way the sunlight hit her hair that day, gold and soft, and I told myself I'd help her get back on her feet. Family takes care of family. That's what I've always believed. I just didn't realize that the same hand I extended to save her would be the one that opened my home to betrayal. Back then, my life felt steady. Not perfect, but peaceful. My husband Daniel and I had been married for 9 years. We lived in a modest house on a quiet street, the kind of place where neighbors waved when they walked their dogs and you could hear the crickets at night. I worked as a nurse, often tired but grateful for the work. Daniel managed a small car dealership downtown. We'd had our ups and downs like any couple, but we had a rhythm. Saturday morning coffee on the porch, his terrible jokes over dinner, the smell of my lavender candle that he said made the house too girly. We didn't have children, but we talked about trying again someday. Then Lily called. She was 28, 5 years younger than me, and had just gone through a breakup that shattered her. Her boyfriend of 3 years had left her for someone else, someone she'd considered a friend. "Can I stay with you for a while?" she asked between sobs. "Just until I figure things out." There wasn't even a question in my mind. Of course she could. When she moved in, she brought noise, laughter, and a kind of lightness I hadn't realized the house was missing. She helped in the kitchen, played music while we cooked, even convinced Daniel to dance with her one evening while I watched, laughing, wiping my hands on a towel. For the first few weeks, it felt good, comforting. My little sister and my husband actually got along. Daniel teased her like a brother would. Lily joked that I'd trained him well. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear them laughing from the living room while I finished charting notes for work. Their laughter was innocent, or so I thought. If you'd asked me then, I would have said we were happy. I had no idea how quickly happiness can turn into denial. The first shift in the air was so subtle I almost missed it. It was the way Lily started dressing differently. She'd always been casual sweatshirts and jeans, but suddenly she wore silk pajamas around the house, the kind that clung just a little too softly. Then Daniel began coming home later. He said business was picking up, that he was staying late to train a new salesman. But sometimes he'd come home with the smell of perfume that wasn't mine, not Lily's either, I told myself, because that would be too absurd. I remember one night, sitting at the kitchen counter, my tea going cold, when Lily walked in wearing one of Daniel's hoodies. I teased her about stealing his clothes. She just smiled and said, "It's comfy." There was a flicker, something in the way she said it, a look she gave me that I couldn't name. I told myself I was being paranoid. I had no reason not to trust them. But deep down, something in me was already shifting. The day everything started to crack was a Sunday. Daniel had gone out to pick up some parts for a car he was fixing, even though he hadn't worked on his car in months. Lily said she had errands to run too. I didn't think much of it until I realized hours had passed, and neither of them had returned. When they both walked in around the same time, separate cars, but within minutes, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. I asked casually, "Where did you go?" Lily said she went to get groceries. Daniel said he'd been at the dealership. Two different stories told with the same calm voice, and yet the grocery bags were empty. That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard whispers from the living room, Daniel's low voice, Lily's soft laugh. When I walked in, they stopped talking. Daniel smiled too quickly. We were just watching TV. The screen was dark. Still, I said nothing. I wanted to believe in the people I loved. But once you sense something's wrong, you start seeing everything. The way Daniel would compliment Lily's cooking more than mine. The way she'd sit too close when they watched movies. The way her eyes followed him like she was studying him. And then the text message. It was a Tuesday evening. I was setting the table for dinner when Daniel's phone buzzed on the counter. He was in the shower. I didn't mean to look, but my eyes caught the preview. Same time tomorrow? No name, just a heart emoji. My hand froze. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding, but the screen locked before I could see the sender. That night, when Daniel came out of the shower, I asked casually, "Did anyone text you?" He looked up, towel in his hands, and said, "Just one of the guys from work." My stomach twisted. He never used heart emojis with the guys from work. Still, I said nothing, because silence is easier than facing the truth. But truth has a way of forcing itself in even when you close every door to it. It came crashing in one night, weeks later, when I came home early from a night shift. It was nearly 11 p.m. The house quiet except for the low hum of the heater. I remember thinking how warm it felt, cozy, almost too cozy for how empty it seemed. Then I noticed 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, a candle still flickering. And from the hallway a sound, laughter, muffled. My heart started to pound so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath my feet. Then I heard her voice, Lily's, whispering his name, and Daniel's voice soft, intimate. For a second, my mind refused to believe it. My body went cold. My breath caught in my throat. I opened the door, and there they were, my husband and my sister, tangled together on my couch. For a moment, the world stopped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, as if my body had left me and I was watching someone else's life collapse. Lily gasped first, yanking the blanket around her like it could hide what I'd already seen. Daniel's face turned pale, the kind of pale that doesn't come from guilt, but from fear. "Emily," he started, his voice shaking. "Don't," I said quietly. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was calm, too calm, the way water looks still before it starts to boil. For a long moment, no one moved. The candle on the table flickered and went out, leaving us in a half-dark room that smelled like wine and betrayal. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, sharp, steady, cruel. Then Lily started to cry. "I'm sorry, Em, please. Don't call me that." I could taste metal in my mouth. My whole body trembled, but I held my ground. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my eyes. "It was a mistake," he muttered. "It just happened." I laughed, a sound that came out broken. "It just happened? My husband and my sister just happened?" The silence that followed was unbearable. I turned to Lily. "How long?" She wiped her tears with shaking hands. "A few months? A few months?" The words cut deeper than any knife. That meant all those dinners, the laughter, the jokes, it had all been a lie. Every moment we shared as sisters. Every quiet night I trusted them under the same roof. I looked at Daniel. "You brought her into our home, into our bed?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't wait for an answer. I walked to our bedroom, my heart pounding in my throat, and started pulling clothes from the closet. Not as mine, because in that moment, I didn't care who stayed. I just knew I couldn't breathe another second in that house. I don't remember much of what happened next, just fragments. The sound of Lily crying behind me, Daniel saying my name over and over, my hands shaking as I stuffed clothes into a duffel bag. When I finally walked out the door, I didn't look back. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, until I found myself parked by the river. The water was dark, the streetlights reflecting on its surface like scattered stars. That's when the tears came, big, uncontrollable sobs that shook through my body. I cried for the marriage I'd lost, for the sister I thought I knew, for the version of myself who still believed love could protect her from betrayal. By dawn, I drove to my friend Clara's house. She didn't ask questions, just opened the door and pulled me into a hug. I stayed there that night, wrapped in one of her old quilts, my phone buzzing nonstop on the table. Messages from Lily, from Daniel, from Mom. "Lily, I didn't mean for it to happen. Please talk to me. Daniel, we can fix this. Don't throw everything away. Mom, your sister says you're upset. What's going on?" I stared at the screen until my eyes burned, then turned the phone off. Days turned into weeks. I went back to work, but I moved like a ghost. At the hospital, I smiled when I needed to, charted patient notes, took vitals. But when I came home to Clara's apartment, I collapsed into silence. I couldn't bring myself to go back to that house, their house now. Lily tried to reach me. She sent letters, voice messages, even came to the hospital once. I avoided her. But one evening, about a month later, she showed up at the parking lot just as I was getting off my shift. She looked thinner, worn out, her hair tied back messily. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "Emily, please," she said, stepping closer. "I need you to hear me out." I wanted to walk away, but something in her face, guilt maybe, it made me pause. "You've said enough," I replied coldly. She shook her head. "You don't understand. I was lonely. You and Daniel, you had everything I wanted. You were stable, loved, seen. I didn't mean to fall for him." "Fall for him?" My voice rose before I could stop it. "He's my husband, Lily." "You didn't fall. You chose. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I know, and I hate myself for it every day. For a second. I wanted to believe her, because forgiveness is easier than holding on to pain. But then I remembered those nights I'd heard them laughing together. The way she'd looked at him when she thought I wasn't watching. You broke us, I said softly. Both of you. She reached out to touch my arm. I stepped back. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said. Maybe one day, but not now. She nodded, sobbing. I understand. Then she whispered, almost to herself, he left me, you know. I frowned. What? Daniel. He said he couldn't live with the guilt. He packed up and left last week. I stared at her, trying to read the truth in her eyes. Good, I said finally. And I walked away. The months that followed were quiet, painfully so. I filed for divorce, packed up the last of my things from the house while they were both gone, and found a small apartment across town. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom, cracked paint, an old couch that smelled faintly of dust. But it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Still, some nights I'd wake up thinking I heard their laughter in the next room. Healing isn't a straight line. It's 1,000 tiny moments of remembering and choosing not to break again. It was around that time I started journaling. My therapist suggested it, said it might help to put my feelings somewhere they couldn't eat me alive. I wrote about anger, about grief, about Lily. And then one night I wrote something different. Maybe this isn't just the story of betrayal. Maybe it's the story of survival. I didn't know then how true that would become, because life, as I learned, has a way of handing you second chances when you least expect them. A few months later, I ran into Lily again, not by choice, but by chance. I was at the grocery store, reaching for a carton of milk, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Emily? I turned around. She looked different. Older, maybe? Or just tired in a way I recognized. Hey, I said quietly. She smiled, a small, fragile smile. You look good. So do you. We stood there in awkward silence, the hum of the refrigerators filling the space between us. Finally, she said, I'm in therapy now, trying to fix things, myself. I nodded. That's good. She looked down. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. Truly. Her voice cracked on that last word, and for the first time, I believed her. I didn't answer her right away. There were 100 things I could have said. That sorry wasn't enough. That she'd destroyed the one family I had left. That her apology couldn't rebuild what she'd burned. But instead I said nothing, because sometimes silence says more than anger ever could. I turned to leave, pushing my cart down the aisle. But halfway through I stopped. My hands gripped the metal handle until my knuckles went white. I took a deep breath, turned around, and walked back to her. Lily, I said softly. She looked up, startled. I can't forget what you did, I continued. But I can't carry this hate forever either. It's too heavy. Tears welled in her eyes again. Does that mean you forgive me? Not yet, I said honestly. But maybe one day, when I can think of you without feeling like I'm bleeding inside. She nodded, her chin trembling. That's fair. We stood there, 2 sisters in the middle of a grocery store, surrounded by strangers, both trying to figure out how to exist after the storm. And for the first time, I didn't feel rage. I just felt tired but lighter somehow. After that day, I didn't hear from Lily again for a while, but something inside me shifted. I started going to yoga classes, volunteering at a community center on weekends, spending time with people who made me laugh without making me doubt my worth. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. It never does. But it became mine again. I painted the walls of my apartment a soft peach color. I planted herbs by the window. I learned to cook for one and to enjoy the quiet without needing to fill it. And slowly, the ache started to fade. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. Neat, rounded, deliberate. It was from Lily. I sat on the couch, holding the envelope for a long time before I opened it. My heart pounded, the way it used to before bad news. Inside was a single page. Dear Emily, I don't expect you to write back. I just needed to tell you that I've moved out of state. I'm starting over, going back to school, working part-time. I haven't spoken to Daniel in months. I realized I was chasing validation from people instead of learning how to love myself. You were always the strong one, Em. the one who protected me. I betrayed that, and I'll live with that regret forever. But I hope someday when you think of me, you'll remember that I was your sister first, before I was your mistake. Love always. Lily. I read it 3 times before I could breathe properly again. And when I finally put it down, I cried, not because I was angry, but because I missed her. The real her. The little sister who used to braid my hair and steal my sweaters. The one who once looked up to me like I was her whole world. That night I lit a candle by the window, lavender, like the one I used to keep in the old house. The flame flickered gently, casting shadows across the room. I whispered into the quiet, "I forgive you, Lily." It wasn't about her anymore. It was about freeing myself. Because forgiveness isn't something you give to the person who hurt you. It's something you give to yourself, so you can stop reliving the wound. A few months later, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was shaky. "It's Lily," she said. "She's been in an accident. Nothing too serious, but she asked for you." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Old wounds reopened in an instant. Fear, anger, love, guilt, all tangled together. But I went. When I walked into that hospital room and saw her lying there, pale, with a small cut on her forehead and an IV in her arm, my heart clenched. She looked up and her eyes widened. "You came." "Of course I did," I said. She smiled weakly. "I didn't think you would." "Well," I sighed, sitting beside her, "you always did underestimate me." We both laughed, a fragile, bittersweet sound. For the next hour we talked. About small things, safe things, movies, food, the weather. It was like walking on a bridge we were both afraid might collapse, but still choosing to take each step anyway. Then, as the nurse came in to check her vitals, Lily reached out and took my hand. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Maybe not," I said gently, "but everyone deserves a chance to do better." Her eyes filled with tears. "You really forgave me?" I squeezed her hand. "I'm trying." She was discharged a few days later. We kept in touch after that, cautiously, carefully. Texts at first, then the occasional phone call. We didn't pretend things were normal. But we started building something new. Not the blind trust we once had, but something more honest. One day, she sent me a picture of herself at her graduation ceremony, a simple community college diploma, but the pride in her eyes made my heart swell. Underneath the photo, she wrote, "You were right, Em. I'm learning to love myself. Thank you for not giving up on me completely." I stared at that message for a long time. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, not erasing the pain, but transforming it into something that could finally breathe. A year later, I met someone new. His name was Mark, a teacher, quiet and thoughtful. We met through a volunteer program at the community center. He didn't rush me, didn't try to fix me. He just listened. One evening over dinner, I told him everything: the betrayal, the divorce, Lily. When I finished, he looked at me for a long time and said, "You must be one of the strongest people I've ever met." I smiled, a real smile, one that reached my eyes. I wasn't always. He reached across the table and took my hand. "But you are now," and for the first time in a very long time, I believed it. Sometimes I still dream about that old house, the creak of the wooden stairs, the scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen in the morning, the faint hum of the dishwasher after dinner. In my dreams, I always wake up and expect to see Daniel sitting at the table, reading the newspaper like nothing ever happened. Sometimes I even hear Lily humming in the guest room, as if those dark months never existed. But when I open my eyes, there's only sunlight streaming through my small apartment window. Quiet, peaceful, and real. That's the funny thing about peace. It doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in quietly, like dawn creeping across a cold night. Months passed. Life found a rhythm again. Mark and I grew closer, the kind of slow, steady love that doesn't need grand gestures to prove itself. He met my mother, who cried when she saw me happy again. And one afternoon, while we were having tea on my balcony, Mark asked, "Do you think you'll ever talk about what happened publicly?" I hesitated. I'd been volunteering at a local women's support group mostly, helping women rebuild their lives after infidelity, emotional abuse, or divorce. Many of them saw their pain reflected in mine. I never told them my full story, not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't sure I could tell it without falling apart. But maybe it was time. The following month, the community center hosted an event called Stories of Starting Over. They invited 3 women to share their experiences of betrayal and healing. The organizer, who'd become a friend, asked if I would speak. That night I stood backstage with trembling hands, clutching a note card I knew I wouldn't use. When it was my turn, I walked onto the small stage, the lights warm against my face. About 50 people sat in the audience, faces blurred by the glow, all waiting. I took a deep breath. "My name is Emily," I began, my voice soft but steady. "And 2 years ago, my world ended right in my own home." A hush fell over the room. "I let my younger sister move in with me after a bad breakup," I continued. "She needed family. I wanted to help, but I didn't know that by opening my door. I was also opening a wound I didn't know existed." My throat tightened, but I pushed through. "I discovered she was having an affair with my husband. In the house I paid for, under the same roof where we shared meals and laughter, there were audible gasps. I saw heads turn, eyes widen. "I won't lie," I said softly. "I wanted to break everything. I wanted to scream, to disappear, to hurt them like they hurt me. But instead, I fell apart quietly, piece by piece. Because betrayal doesn't always explode. Sometimes it seeps in like poison, slow and invisible." The room was utterly still. I left that house with nothing but my clothes and my car. I started over from scratch. And for a long time, I thought forgiveness meant weakness. But I've learned that forgiveness is not saying what you did is okay. It's saying, I won't let what you did define me anymore. Tears blurred my vision. I forgave my sister, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. The audience erupted into quiet applause, not loud or celebratory, but soft and respectful, like a sigh of understanding. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. After the event, several women came up to me, their eyes wet with empathy. One said, "You just told my story." Another whispered, "Thank you." I thought I was the only one. That night, as I drove home, I realized something profound. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor with a voice. And sometimes, telling your story is the bravest way to reclaim your power. A few weeks later, Lily reached out again. She'd seen a short clip of my speech on social media. Someone had filmed it. She texted, "I saw your talk. You were incredible. I cried. I'm proud of you, Em." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the message, feeling the sting of irony and love mixed together. After a while, I typed back, "Thank you. I'm proud of you, too. I heard you're doing well." She replied with a heart emoji. Simple, quiet, and somehow that was enough. Months turned into a year. Mark and I moved in together. He asked me one evening, as we were unpacking boxes, "Do you ever regret letting your sister back into your life?" I thought about it. "No," I said, because forgiving her wasn't about her. It was about me refusing to let bitterness grow roots inside me. He smiled. "That's the strongest kind of forgiveness there is." One day, out of the blue, I got a letter from Daniel. It had been over 3 years since the divorce. He wrote, "Emily, I saw your talk online. I don't know if I have any right to say this, but I'm sorry, truly. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I destroyed it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I've changed. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I hurt the people who loved me most. I hope you find happiness wherever you are. Daniel." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my drawer. For a long moment, I stared out the window at the evening sky, the kind that turns gold before it fades into blue. And I whispered, "I already have." When people hear my story now, they often ask me the same question. How did you find the strength to forgive? And I always tell them this. Strength doesn't come from pretending you're not broken. It comes from learning to live with the cracks and still finding light through them. When I look back on it all now, it feels like I'm watching another woman's life. Someone I used to know. Someone who still believed that love alone could keep a family together. But life has its own lessons, doesn't it? Sometimes it teaches you through loss, sometimes through silence, and sometimes through the very people you thought would protect you. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that betrayal doesn't end the story. It changes its direction. Because the day I walked out of that house, I thought my life was over. But what I didn't know was that something new was being born in me. Strength. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't seek revenge, doesn't need validation. Just the quiet strength to say, I will not be destroyed by this. I don't hate my sister anymore. I don't hate my ex-husband either. Hate ties you to the very people who broke you. Forgiveness cuts that rope. It doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding. If you're watching this and you've been betrayed by family, by love, by someone who looked you in the eye and lied, I want you to know this. You will survive it. The pain won't last forever, even though it feels like it might. And one day, you'll wake up and realize that your story didn't end in that moment of betrayal. It began there. Because that's what healing really is. Learning to breathe again after the storm has passed. I used to believe my home was where my marriage was, where my sister was, where my family gathered. But now I know home is peace. And peace is what you build for yourself, one honest day at a time. Would you have forgiven her? Would you have been able to start over the way I did? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if you've ever walked through your own kind of heartbreak, know that your story matters too. Thank you for listening to mine. Soft outro music fades, warm, reflective tone.